Hi, everybody, and welcome to ArCONa. Thank you all for sticking around and listening to all the awesome panels. I hope you enjoyed all the awesome panels before. If you haven't seen some of these familiar faces, they're still here. And for this panel, we are going to be discussing non-Western traditions and folklore. But before we get started, why don't we have everyone introduce themselves very briefly, and then we can move on from there, okay? Let's go with you, TK, since you're always here.
It's me, TK. I'm a prince. What are we doing? I'm so sorry.
Oh, non-Western traditions and folklore.
No, are we introducing ourselves? What are we doing?
Yes, introducing yourself.
Okay.
It's been a day. How many of these have you done?
It's me. It's TK. I write spooky stories on the internet. You can find me on Twitter. TK joins the fray. I'm very excited to be here. I'll be representing brown people everywhere. I'm just kidding. Yoruba animists, West African tradition. Who's next?
All right. Lucia.
Hi, I'm Lucia. I'm the owner of Seer Sword, so I do TTRPG stuff online, and then I'm just recently trying to kind of put out more of my witchy content alongside of it. Me and Paladin here just finished up. Well, we finished up the book a while ago, but we're like on the cusp of releasing the physical copy of the Islands of Sina Una. So that's our pre-colonial Philippine setting. So that's what I'm here representing is like that side of my craft. And so yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And Paladin.
Hi, I'm Paladin. Ignore the display name on the overlay. My name is Paladin. It feels weird being called my legal name these days. You can find me on Twitter. I make TTRPG books. I do a lot of old world research in order to make those. Today I'm representing a book you may not have heard of ever called The Islands of Sina Una, which Lucia was the director of. Yeah, we finished up the book technically in October, and I've been getting it to print. I want to scream a lot more, but we only have an hour, so a lot of my knowledge comes from pre-colonial Philippine studies and just kind of backtracking on what Christianity. Are we still PG-13? I'm going to assume yes.
I'm going to assume yes.
A lot
You
of what
didn't
Christianity
use up the
forked
F word in the last one, so it's fine.
Oh, I got thumbs then. Cool.
You banked on it.
Yeah.
It rolls over.
And I just do a lot of studies on what Christianity kind of forked over.
Yep. That's a statement. And Friday.
Hi, I'm Friday. I am here. I feel a little bit like sheepish to be here because I'm being a rebel. I am here to represent technically Western, however, Mexican indigenous.
The most Western.
Right?
Yeah. Most
Western. Well, I asked Lisa, I applied for this panel and I was like, does it count if it's technically in the West, but it's like pre-colonial, like Mexican indigenous practices, like geographically Western, but like in a cool rebel way. So that's
Is Mexico considered the global South? Or is it?
I don't know. It's just kind of there.
Whoever decides to redraw the maps every other time and then just says, "Oh, now this is the global South."
I don't know, but I'm excited to be here and to talk about, about Mexican indigenous practices and how they were folded in and also survived the Catholic takeover and what that looks like even still to this day. So that's kind of what I brought to contribute to the conversation, and I'm very excited to have a venue to discuss that because it's a huge part of my lifelong practices and my background, and I'm freaking amped to be here.
I'm really pumped that we're all like kind of coming from backgrounds where it's like, let's talk about how Catholicism ruined our lives.
Right?
Honestly, right now I'm just waiting for the map redraw where Central America becomes South America and South America becomes South America.
South.
South.
Sir.
And I will be your lovely moderator today. My name is Jacky. You can better known as Death by Mage. I am the creative lead for Unbreakable Publishers, where we do Asian-owned stories, where Paladin actually did the cover for Volume 1 and possibly more.
I want to cheer, but you all look uncomfortable.
No, that's just
I don't know how to react.
No, just the cover I'm doing. The cover I'm going to spill the beans. The cover I'm doing for the next one is a bit different.
Yes, I heard mentions.
I have to be very careful with it.
I'm looking forward to seeing it. And also I also publish TTRPGs myself as well, and I will be representing primarily Chinese traditions and how that has shaped over the course of its long-winded history, the influences that came about it, especially during the wonderful time after the Boxer Rebellion and all the terrible things that happened later. Yes, Paladin. That was a lot.
Everything's bad. Everything's bad.
And again, everybody, for you all coming in, ArCONa is benefiting for the Bat Conservation International's mission to end bat extinctions worldwide. So if you have a chance to donate to the cause, please do if you can. If not, definitely share the link out to friends and anybody who would be interested. And also for your bat facts of the day, bats are night pollinators critical to our ecosystem. And also scientists believe that estimate that insect-eating bats may save U.S. farmers roughly $23 billion a year by reducing crop damage and limiting the need for pesticides.
Holy shit.
Yes, that's actually a lot of money.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Wait, my F-bomb! I said that for a reason!
You still have the rest of the panel.
S words don't count for
I don't know.
They don't count them.
I don't know if I still have it. TK, do I still have it? Are you gonna take that one too?
I'm so sorry.
So everything is ruined
Is
by
that
the
what
Catholics,
the
but also
count's supposed to
TK.
be? I think we'll be generous and be like one per person. How's that sound?
I can't believe I just dipped in and snatched the swear from your like grasping hands.
100% believe you just did that.
Can I get two and TK gets one less?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I'll relinquish mine for Paladin.
I got 3!
Banking on 3, so keep the counts, everybody.
No, this is the last panel. Use up all of tomorrow's too.
That's
Don't do that. Don't listen to me.
and then tomorrow.
This is not my. That's a problem for future Paladin.
Yeah.
No,
That's
it's
a
not.
future-
I'm not on the panel tomorrow.
No,
That's
a future.
a
That's a
problem for someone else. That's even.
That'll probably
better.
be my panel.
I'm so sorry. I'm doing bad. I'm doing a bad job.
Oh boy. All right. So before we get
Bad.
so while we get started, why don't we talk about so Friday brought up a great point about what is considered Western culture, because are we talking geographically? We're probably not, but we need to but we probably want to identify what Western culture is usually iconically labeled towards, and what it's usually what comprises it. So if anyone wants to take a stab at it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with power, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think
It's
when
power.
yeah, like dominant sort of accepted, like quote normalized, culture of bodies in power and bodies that are sort of like making the rules socially and asserting themselves over, I think is often what I hear people mean by that.
Is a dead white man on your money? Sorry.
Yeah.
I have too much caffeine.
No, that's pretty fine actually. We want the caffeine. This is a stream about tea, bats, and witchery.
And my F-bombs.
Yeah, and your F-bombs.
Impending. Where will they come in? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
I think like adding on to what Friday mentioned, like the idea of like the West, it's like, who decided where the center of the map was anyway, right? Because if you go the opposite direction, then you're flipped anyway.
Yeah.
Or who decided we're not reading it like north south instead, and then that's our West. So I think that, like, if you think about who would technically be in the middle that would decide that this way was West and this way was East, it's very much about like who had power. And it's kind of, it's like, yeah, we know who put the middle right there. We know who centralized themselves, kind of.
Yeah. Who wrote your constitution? Did they look like you?
Yeah.
Tim, I'd also like to bring up, if I may, the point about trade routes. I mean, most of what I know, honestly, is from like agriculture and specifically like the tea and spice trade. And so I can really only speak from a background that specifically deals in international trade. But if we're looking at like the history of like the Silk Road and things like that, that was a major turning point in international trade, and not only just the trade of goods, but also we saw a lot of the spread of religion, a lot of the spread of culture, a lot of the spread of, disease and money and all of these things, and practices that were both government practices as well as spiritual practices and everything in between, just like the practice of being a human being and what that looks like in, quote, civilized society. There was a lot of who has the money and who's in charge of the trade routes and who's deciding what ideas get spread where because it benefits them. And, if we are looking specifically at the Silk Road, a lot of it was coming from the Mediterranean, a lot of it was coming from, from Rome, a lot of it was coming from England and coming over to where the goods were that they wanted. And we start to get into things like how England intentionally got all of China hooked on opium so that they can make better tea deals, things like that. So it's like, that's very much speaks to me of the West, like the attitude, when I talk about the attitude of like power and who's in control and who has the money. Honestly, I'm coming from a background where it's like I studied the Silk Road specifically, and my brain is like, ding, 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 that shit.
Profits over people.
There so besides the geopolitical powers, what about the religious powers? Because that also ties into how Western traditions are portrayed as well, because certain beliefs and faiths and religions will have their own theologies and mythologies would be applied more so than, and they would usually be probably put in as like the standard and you see that across the major parts of the world where it's like, this is where we started. And Lucy and Paladin and everyone else here, as we said in the beginning of this panel, how much are we going to blame Catholicism here? Which is how much?
How much blame does Catholicism deserve?
True.
Yeah, I think like, and I know that when me and Paladin were working on Sina Una together, that was something that affected both of us, because a lot of my family lasting now is Catholic. And it's like, it was so hard to research and talk to them and be like, yeah, can you tell me about your experience and all these things? And it's almost like all those traditions that really bound together, like, different communities, like way back then, it's like they're a taboo now because of that impact that Catholicism had. And like talking about like trade roads and everything, they, like, when they came in and they colonized, we learned this and it was devastating, of they cut us off from other surrounding countries so that it was literally just, we're here and that's all you get.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, having these panels now, like in the modern times, it's kind of interesting that we get to go back and research and talk to other people now, because it's like Catholicism was such a border between us, and it's like, it's kind of crazy that it was like this wall to get past when the Philippines is a bunch of islands. Like,
it's like penning you in, and then the erosion of your cultural and social identity and who you are as like a people, erasing your history, cutting you off from the outside world as well as from like your own internal history is just like cool.
Yeah, so I worked on Sina Una, and it was in a word horrific sometimes. Because Lucy and I would talk for hours about just kind of what we were just going through, because none of us can afford a therapist, I guess, but also it's fun to commiserate with someone. But just like, when when a lot of Filipino Americans talk about being Filipino, it's always in the context of like halo halo or some other food. And a lot of our culture, our actual heritage that's not somehow related to the West, which is primarily just Eastern Europe, and some countries in Eastern Europe, and their main children in America. um, we found a lot of roadblocks in our own family. Lucy's family is Catholic, but my family, immediate family, are all part of a Christianity group born in the Philippines. And it's very strange because the first Filipino person I met who wasn't a part of this group was Dante Bosco, of all people. Um, and I happened to meet him by pure chance. That was the first time I met another Filipino person who wasn't part of this group. And it always felt weird that, like, if I try to learn about, my heritage, it's always in the context of Christianity. That feels wrong somehow. But I'm 10. I don't have the tools to process this. I'm going to play with Legos. Um, Compared to now, where it's like, oh, this is why I didn't find anything out. Okay, cool. And I can't really talk to those people I grew up with uh, anymore, because when I try to talk about what I do and I talk about what I researched, I get one or two responses of, "You don't believe that stuff, right?" Or, "What do you mean we had dragons?" Which neither one of those are really fun responses to get. So you end up with a lot of people who are blocked off from their own cultures because of what Christianity did with co-opting and erasing.
Yeah, I remember speaking with my grandfather about because he was around he was just out of college when um, World War II was happening, and so my great grandparents were still alive for at least until not long ago. My great grandparents used to tell me about how different it was being in China and in Hong Kong, because I have a lot of cousins and family who adopted a lot of Christian beliefs and everything else. And then there's my section of the family, which we never adopted any of those things. Some of us became agnostic, and some of us still hold on to some of the older traditions. But for and the only exception was my one aunt who was formally baptized because we needed to act as white as possible. So, because we were in Canada. Um, so there it it kind of leaves me to wonder about like how things get, what changes, what we have to do to sometimes keep our identity in some capacity, what things had to be done to hold on to those little facets. Like, I'm sure every one of us has heard some story about how cultures were preserved despite whatever changes in the society, based on whether it be from invasion, conquering, or anything else. Because yeah, like my great grandfather had actually two wives, but then at the time of World War II, the movement, the Christian movement was really much about, no, you should really stick to monogamy, and everyone else is like, but the original system was actually was purely financial. It wasn't really anything else. It was literally, I like this person enough that I want to support them, and I have and you actually couldn't actually acquire another spouse without literally having documentation to prove it, that you can financially support them. So that was like a real thing where, when things like when you see those kind of things, I think I learned that when I was like 10, and I realized, wow, what else did we lose out on, and what else did we try to sort of had to change to fit in to make it work, despite all the other things that we were losing. So I think, so how do we all feel when it comes to the how, since we have like this template of now what Western culture or Western traditions tend to be portrayed as, how does that relate to how non-Western, so basically everyone that's not them, how are they portrayed in terms of things like literature, media, academia, because they get their own, they end up getting portrayed differently, they have their own biases, and there's also a lot of other things that are usually latched onto it as well. So if anyone wants to tackle that.
Oh,
I'm pretty vocal about this on Twitter. But I have this running thing with Daniel Kwan where whenever we find something on Kickstarter that rips off of some Asian culture, usually Japan, sometimes Korea, where it uses the chopsticks font and shows off like, check out Asia, and just showcases like the bare surface levels of
Yeah.
Japanese culture, which just means ninjas and samurai and geishas. And it hurts, it sucks. Then I get a little bit deeper where I talk about the effects Orientalism have had on how people approach incorporating Asian media into their like D&D games, which quite often is poorly. Um, like Jacky, you and I work on Unbreakable. I'm
Mhm.
just doing the cover stuff, so I only see stuff at a cursory glance when I deign to go into the Discord server.
It's okay.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have much to say. I'm just a cover dude, but you have a lot of these people who are very passionate about their own cultures and want to show off all this very nuanced and diverse and complicated stuff from their own cultures, and then you see, basic people just making the same stuff where they rip off of what they think is cool about Japan and call it Asia. And it sucks because that applies to a lot of film and a lot of comics as well. If I go to comics from the 2000s era, or if I think about comics that my friends recommended to me from the 2000s era of comics, there is a lot of people who, if you want to refer to someone as being very stealthy or as being very dexterous, they're like a ninja, dude. And it sucks. I'm very vocal about it on Twitter, but I see a lot of people trying to incorporate some kind of new spice to their game, and they try and use the bare surface levels of Asian cultures. Or
because they don't
by
know how
that I
to
mean
use
just Japan.
spices. Sorry.
Well, to be fair, we did find out recently that to be fair though, they actually purposely they there was a point when the spice trade, when people wonder why did food go bland in Europe? Well, because they actually boycotted spices out of racism. So they did it to themselves. They did it to themselves.
Y'all could have been learning how to cook chicken.
Yeah.
Oh, they still don't know how to cook chicken. I mean,
I'm
let's be
so
honest
sorry.
here.
That kind of makes me remember the whole thing about like why there's like frosted flakes and then just cornflakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Are we gonna talk about Reverend Kellogg? I'm
Oh, I
sorry.
hope
No,
so.
we can't talk about
Oh.
Reverend Kellogg in this panel. I'm
We
sorry.
can't.
That we can, but then it would just become the Reverend Kellogg panel.
Are we going
So
to
much
talk
to say
about
about that
Reverend
clown.
Kellogg and his yogurt enemas? Sorry.
Oh.
No, we're not. Moving
Sorry,
forward.
we're not.
Yeah, we're moving forward with that.
Moving forward, no.
I will exert my executive
Please.
authority as the moderator here.
Fair.
I think the other thing too is like so I was doing some digging when it came to talking about like what, especially like how Western cultures, like they sometimes, because Western culture set up the paradigms for everything else, it doesn't translate very well across cultures and especially different cultures, and it comes out in a way where when there's no other basis to work from, then it becomes inefficient, useless. I was sharing, I think I shared with all of you on an email about like how we had like scholarly discourse about the lack of theory fiction tools to assess like, well, in the case of the article writer, it was Chinese specific fiction theory. And the thing is, the tools that exist in Western culture fiction theory doesn't necessarily apply because they don't have the same kind of background that the Chinese people had. They had different belief systems, they had different philosophies, but especially the way that philosophies develop over time, from the basis of Confucianism over time, changing over time, and the other various different cultures and beliefs that came out of it, like Taoism, Buddhism, all the things in between. And you realize that like, yeah, this you're using something that's not meant for you, but there's no other basis. But if you don't use it, everyone treats it like you're basically not following the rubric, and therefore you're not being valid. And it just it gets to that point where you're going, even for a scholar, you're just going, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Yeah, I mean, talking about perception, especially. I've lived in Florida like most of my life. I live here now, and I know there's like a lot of stories about
Fellow
Florida.
Floridian here.
Oh, awesome! There's
We
like,
can suffer together.
yeah. Usually, what I get is that, oh, you live in Florida, like that must suck, and it's like, yeah, it does, because when you learn about what was here, it's horrific. And so, one of the stories that I always tell people to kind of put it in perspective is I went to a museum, and this was while we were working on Sina Una. And I went to this museum, and they were talking about like the indigenous people that had lived here, and when the Spanish came over and found, they had a prayer hall where they were keeping their dead in boxes that had floated on shore, and they were of Spanish make, but they were large enough to fit a person. So they were preserving them. And that was like their, not even religion, because it kind of didn't really exist to them in that way, but it was just their way of having them be somewhere where they can be respected. And the Spanish came, and they were like, uh, if you don't follow the Bible and you don't do this and blah blah blah, like we'll come over here and we'll burn all your stuff and we'll kill you and all this stuff. And the native people were like, yo, we don't even speak Spanish. Like there's no communication here. And so when they came back, they burned that house down, and they kept coming and taking, and until eventually, like, they were just forced to either die there defending what they had left, or migrating out and possibly like risking their lives in just like with no community support and being gone from this place that they called home. And I remember I learned all that, and I was reading this testimony from like one of the lasting Native members of the community, and she was like, I have seen so much happen to my people, and it's been passed down, of trauma after trauma after trauma has been passed down to me. And I will have fought against the likes of people like Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln. And the most that you will know of me is a plaque in a museum where they are trying to showcase my culture, and you will never have known the burden it was to carry it. And that like stuck with me the whole time that I was writing the book. And it stuck with me like now as I practice, witchcraft in my normal day, of like, you really have no idea how harmful it is to reduce Asia to like, ramen noodle stands and ninjas, when it's like, no, there's so much more, but you're reading it on a museum plaque, and that's all you'll ever get of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about like perception, I always tell that story, because then it's like, I was sitting there looking at this woman, and I was like, she looks like pictures that I have of my Lola, and I know that it's like, saying like non-Western, and people are like, they get kind of sensitive about it, because they're like, oh, you just mean like, not European, not white. And it's like, yeah, because there's a shared experience, there's a shared trauma. And like, not sorry to Catholicism, but like, it has a lot to do with all of that. And it is something that you all kind of understand when you grow up and you start learning about it, and you're like, oh man, you're telling me that like we were allowed to like love the same people of the same gender, or like gender didn't even really exist, and I'm like growing up and I'm learning all these things. And it's like we were like more progressive, regressed because then we were more civilized, and now we're trying to be more progressive again. Like it's wild. So yeah, that's my spiel on perception of culture and witchcraft.
I know
Uh,
we've been
go.
doing at the tea shop, we've been doing a book club thing, and actually brought TK in to speak recently, 1 month, because we were reading and discussing Mexican Gothic, which is a beautiful book that like really spoke to me, and I was so excited about it because it is very much about like, you know, being a person who exists and is a human being and happens to be in Mexico and all of this, like whatever, you know. And the author was speaking about how frustrating it was when she was releasing the book and everyone kept trying to categorize it as magical realism. It is straight up like it's a gothic horror novel. And she got so frustrated. She said, everyone keeps trying to tell me that my book is magical realism because it's in Mexico. And because there's a supernatural element to it, and she had to fight so hard to even get recognized that that wasn't what her book was about. But there was something that came up that is actually a lot to do with what we were just discussing, where there's this sense of like what is civilized versus, you know, what is like backwards, and who is in charge of that narrative. And it was something that TK and I were like discussing and got really fired up about during that book club meeting. And I still think about it and get really fired up because there's this whole sense in that book of like the Englishmen that come to central Mexico and they see the indigenous you know, practices there, and they say, ew, no, that's bad and wrong. And like and like they even like brought dirt from England to their home just so that they could be on English soil in the middle of rural Mexico. And there's a character who is like, you know, a witch of the woods type who's still out there practicing indigenous Mexican witchcraft, who of course is like the one that you should go to when actual stuff is going down, you know. But like she's so presented by the white Englishman as like, oh, this heathen, this like gross, like, ew, you know, she's so backwards, she's so behind, she doesn't know what's going on. And their way is like the correct way. But in the context of this book, I just really enjoyed seeing that representation of like, okay, sure, they're saying like she's, you know, it was the civilized versus savage like discussion was so present in this novel, and I hadn't really seen it so blatantly in your face, like, ew, look how gross this is when people are like this. And I very much appreciated seeing those practices that have had to be kind of tucked away and hidden inside of acceptable Catholic, you know, practices just to even survive, seeing those so nakedly presented, and presented as, look at how easy it is for people outside of this culture who benefit from oppressing it to do so. And look at how messed up that is, and look at how gross that feels to witness that, you know. I just really liked that a lot. So there's something about, you know, the whose idea of progress is it, you know, that is huge, and I think really key to examine. Say, okay, who's this benefiting though, if we consider this backwards?
I'd super love to piggyback back off of that just super quick. Just
Please.
because I think that there's an issue with academia where people are trying to sort of a sort of revisionist history of the like conquistadores and that entire like era of conquest in the global south, and the idea that like, oh well, many of them married like indigenous women and had indigenous children, raised their lands and everything, became part of the community, while also ignoring the fact that the Spanish Inquisition, the Vatican Inquisition, and the Portuguese Inquisition all carried over from the mainland to their colonies. And so in many cases, see, where the Inquisition was in the mainland, a lot of it was, yes, political, yes, about land, and it could be fought out on that turf. But in its colonies, it was very much, it became, I don't want to say it became, but it evolved to a greater degree to a racial angle, because obviously a lot of Muslims and Jewish people looked a little bit more European as opposed to you know, indigenous Central Americans, etc. And so people who did not represent Europe from that like very light skinned or white perspective, those were the ones that did not get to keep their land, did not get to keep their legacy, did not get to keep anything that the conquistadors essentially stole, and rightfully so, reparations. But that was all turned over to white Spain and white Portugal and white Italy, or white Rome rather. And so you see a lot of that where people are like, well, they actually like really lived with the people and things like that, and it's like, if they were the right, if they were, if they passed the paper bag test, sure. And you see like that sort of like thing where people forget that in a lot of these colonies, the stringent standards were very like raised, and a lot of that did have to do with skin color, a lot of that did have to do with how they were represented. And you can see in academia the way that that's reflected, and the way that traditions and even living faiths and living traditions for non-Western European people are represented in books with words like mythology. Sure, mythology is a real thing, but don't just call it Asian mythology. That just sets a true false dichotomy that implies that everything from Asia is just true false. Like you're putting it in the same as like fables and fairy tales and stuff, and that's not true. These are like, some of these are living traditions and cosmologies that shape the way that people live their lives even to this day. Put some fucking respect on that. I'm so sorry, Paladin. I didn't mean to.
Take it.
I'm a liar.
Paladin's face. Paladin's face.
Oh, sorry. No, take mine from tomorrow. I'm so sorry. I got fired.
You fucking try and be polite to people.
Ew. Nice.
I'm gonna piggyback off of what you just mentioned about like different
Yes,
like Asian mythology specifically, but like
Hmm.
because I do imbibe on Western video game culture, I am exposed to a lot of people's bare surface understanding of Japanese mythology, because of course I do. And like the concept of yokai is so from Japan, which is just like spirits that exist and they come about in certain ways and they do very specific actions, is so radically different from like the animism that Lucy and I had to research.
Mm-hmm.
I love animism. I'm an animist, so of course I love it. But
yeah, and like I had this like talk with our lead writer for Cine Una, where I talked about how we kind of had to break away from the Western thought process. And the way I talked about this was, if there are 3 mountains and you go to mountain number 1 for iron, you go to mountain number 3 for gold, what do you call the second mountain? And the answer is you don't call it anything. You don't have a relationship with that mountain. You leave it the fuck alone. If I'm going to the grocery store, I'm not assigning names to people I pass by. I'm not trying to force a dynamic with the person that I pass by who is also happen to buying like pasta for the night. I got nothing to do with that fucking person. And there are my swears. Because I keep track, because I'm polite like that, TK.
all right.
Wow. Wow. Called out.
Look, my mom's white. I don't know how to act.
My dad's white. I still know how to act.
See, this is the dichotomy. Colonialism is tearing us apart.
I'm pretty sure you're taking my swears and tearing us apart right now. But,
Just over here with my tea.
But like we learned a lot about animism, a whole lot about animism with working on Cine Una, and like and moving this forward. Like one of my researchers was talking to me about just like one of our researchers, a person named BJ Restio, uses Sia Kanya pronouns. And we were talking about it one day, and we were just talking about like trying to find the exact quote here. They said they personally saw Sia and Kanya as ungendered, but not necessarily without gender or being without. I think it's, to quote them, I think it's because the framework of Tagalog and related languages is animist, which has trouble with the idea of nothingness. When even the grass has a spirit, everything exists, And I took that in, and it resonated with me. It's why there's Sia on this overlay. There's Sia on my Twitter bio. I got a message from someone when I first put it up there, asking why I'm buying into this neo-pronoun bullshit. Why I'm making up a pronoun. When the pronoun has existed longer than I've been taking in oxygen. And like, you lose out on just these very delicate things when you kind of blur everything together. Some of the I used to make a living off of painting, and some of the best colors I got came about from natural processes of mixing colors. But the worst came about when I was just like, okay, I'm going to blend colors this exact way every time, and if I want to get this exact shade, I have to be precise with everything. And okay, I'm going to blend it all together instead of just like being creative with it. When I muddled the colors up, I got a very boring painting. When I was being aware of the colors I was using, I made something a lot more vibrant. And you lose out on different cultures' vibrancy when you make your fucking Kickstarter with the chopstick font. And I'm thinking about Oriental Adventures all over again.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're a bouquet of heritage.
yes.
I like it.
I like that. I like that.
That made me think so much about I am straight up pulling out a tarot deck right now because I have something to say about the monolithic viewpoint in terms of heritage and old practices. And there's a deck that I recently acquired that does such beautiful tribute. So this deck is called, if you don't mind my sharing, I don't know, Jacky, I don't want to like.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, cool. So this is the Santa Muerte Tarot, and it's called Santa Muerte Book of the Dead, and it's gorgeous, and it is by Fabio Lestrani, an Italian artist. However, the content is 100% super faithfully researched and beautifully illustrated Mexican history and spirituality from all regions and all points of history. And the more I look at it, the more I'm like, holy crap, Fabio, yeah, buddy. Like, you did your damn research here. And it's so respectfully done that like I had a hesitation when I bought it. I was like, we'll see. Okay. But like,
yeah.
Okay. To the point that my favorite thing about this is how he has illustrated Mayan and Aztec motifs as separate things, totally separate things, separate energy. And I really love that about him. And we have things like here on my like temperance card here, we have so much Aztec specific geometry and imagery and all of that. And this is a card where like so much solar energy and balance energy and like agricultural cycles are very present in this one. And then we have things about like our Emperor Empress card, or a diptych, which is super cool. And there's a lot more like Mayan kind of geometric shapes going on in here. And this is a card that's very much about like cycles and power, and different sides of power. And I just find that in terms of like cultural history and regional kind of gosh, what I'm trying to say, like what parts of practice and what kinds of practice, what energy of practice is traditionally kind of a part of that region specifically, what sort of energy is uplifted in those practices, I feel like is really well reflected in where he chose to use each of those motifs. And I came into this so ready to judge this shit. And I was like, oh, okay, actually, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But I loved seeing that. And that was so like, I had a very emotional reaction to that, to seeing the Aztec and Mayan artistic motifs and geometric like magic influence there as separate things, and so faithfully put with the correct kind of energy and the correct sort of focuses of energy and practice was huge. Because I typically see those things, they're considered to be like old dead practices, so it's so common to see like, ooh, old-timey Central America, you know, the Mayan, Aztec, whatever monolith. Seeing them separate was just like a beautiful, beautiful emotional thing. So I just wanted to celebrate that for a minute.
No, I totally agree, because it's one of those things where even just like Paladin was talking about, like how Asian culture is, or even like when they put Asian mythology, and it's just like, oh, look at this blender that they just put through all of our stuff together, and they put three different things together in one image, and you're going, that's not how that works. And
Yeah.
and that happens a lot with like Mesoamerica, where it's just like the same thing. We're just gonna shoehorn all these things in. You do realize that's like from 4 different civilizations that may have existed at the same time, but really try not to deal with each other that much. That this shouldn't happen that way.
It's cavemen riding dinosaurs. Like,
And
what's happening here?
Actually, Friday, tangentially related to that, there's an artist who I adore by the name of Yoshi Yoshitani.
Oh yeah, I know Yoshi.
Yoshi. Yeah.
She is Japanese American. She has one Japanese parent, has one white parent, and she made this book called Tarot of the Divine. And she did a bunch. I do too, because I love it. She did a bunch of research, and I love her art so much. And I found out she was doing one card using Filipino mythology. I thought, oh my god, that's so cool. And I found out that that she made this card for a deity named Bulan. Bulan, who married the god of death. And I read that and I was like, oh no, oh no, oh no. Thank you, Jacky, for correcting me. Yoshi did this card up for Bulan Sidapa, but that myth isn't real. That myth was made in the past decade by someone into kids. And when Yoshi found that out, Yoshi repurposed it, modified it a little bit, and now the card is for Bakunoa and the Seven Moons, which makes the deck digestible for me and made me want to buy a full poster print of that card. Because Yoshi did proper research.
Yeah, it's huge.
So I know we all come from different backgrounds, and I know we've adopted a lot of different traditions as well. We even mixed in like traditions, like with using tarot and mixing in our cultures. And so so I want to talk about the intersection of that, how we manage to develop, like, because as whether you're practitioners or people who research, right, like how does the intersection affect you when it comes to connecting with the heritage and cultures that you've had or have, and also having this other paradigm that's been basically jammed into our brains since birth, and cope and figuring that middle ground and how to navigate that, especially for our own personal journeys, whether it be for academic, creative, or magic or spiritually.
Yeah, I'll say I've become quite adept at I take what serves me and I leave what doesn't.
Yep.
Since being raised hardcore in the Catholic Church, we used to have to go to Mass 3 times on Saturdays, English, Spanish, and Latin, because the rest of my time was spent on my dad's side of the family. I was raised on a pagan spiritual retreat, Irish Druidic tradition in like the Redwoods. And so my abuelas were like, no, on the weekends, your soul is ours and we're going to save you. So I spent a lot of time in Mass on the weekends. And I took a lot of things from that were valuable to me, and a lot of ritual and a lot of practice that were valuable to me. Por ejemplo, I got this on my desk right now. I got my Santeria going over here right now. I have so many saint candles around my house, and I'll put, whatever like herbs and oils and things like that bring right to me and are based on those old indigenous practices. And they still have Catholic saints on them and prayers in Spanish written on them. And I'm like, yeah, that's a part of it. That's cool. That works for me. I can roll with that. However, what I don't do is go to Mass and let them tell me that I'm going to burn in hell because like I had a baby out of wedlock. Like, I'm good. I don't really need that in my life. So I've become very, very excellent at recognizing this works for me. This doesn't work for me, and cherry picking from my own culture and heritage, what's going to actually be fulfilling and helpful for me. And then the rest of it can just stay over there.
Yeah.
Ryder really said, no, thank you. I'm full.
Yeah.
No, thank you. No more for me, please. Thank you.
Yeah,
Lucia,
I think
Paladin,
that.
or...
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying either one who wants to come in.
I think that, like, especially right now, I think so many people are kind of coming around to like the reason that I came around to witchcraft in particular as like just an everyday practice was I felt like I had so much more control over myself and how it made me feel. Because when I was raised, you know, as a Christian, it was like there were some things that would happen that I was like, that's not right. I'm not supposed to do that, or whatever it might have been. And I think that now I've become so comfortable with it because I've learned, and it's it's awesome to like have that experience and be able to finally be like, yeah, I'm Filipino, and I'm not going to say that I'm half anymore. I'm not going to be like, yeah, my mom is Filipino and my dad is white and blah blah blah, like these are my percentages and my ancestry.com or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, I'm Filipino. And the thing that really kind of gets me though about like modern witchcraft is how they like they take pieces from real like heritages and like beliefs, and it's just kind of like, yeah, we'll take like a little bit of that and then capitalize on it, and we'll sell chakra aligning crystals when it's like that's like not a witchcraft thing. Like that's part of another person's belief system. And by all means, like if that's what you want to do, you should be researching and supporting those things. But like do the work, you know? I think that as far as like non-Western beliefs, like you have to do the work. You have to learn and you have to like know. And if you're so fortunate enough to like be brought up in it like Friday, like that sounds awesome. I would have loved to have had those experiences like with my Lola Veronica, who was like the village witch. And you know, just generationally like wouldn't have worked out. But I think about her and how like there would have been no way that in this time she would be like, yeah, you have to like cleanse your crystals and buy this like really expensive thing for it and do all this. She'd be like, no, just throw them in some rice, they'll be fine, you know. Or like the versions of witchcraft is so different depending on like who you are and where you pull inspiration from. And so like talking about intersectionality, I think it's so important that you're looking at like why do I have 7 chakras? Why don't I have 1,000? And why is it for some people they're trying to align them and then some other people are trying to destroy them? Like those are things that I feel like you should know, because it's like, okay, so I have these like 7 stones in my body and people are like, no, you have 1,000 of them. And then some people are like, they have all these different beliefs. And so for me at least, like I've been like learning about all these beliefs that they used to have and how, you know, their version of cleansing your home was so different, and how some people are like, yeah, sweep your house at midnight. And I'm like, my Lola would kill me for that. If I sweep when it's dark, I'm putting dust in somebody's eyes. You know? Stuff like that. So I think it's really interesting to like again have these conversations about what people believe, and where it comes from, because it's so personal and it's really cool. I do think though that there could be a little bit more like we didn't just make this up, you know, there it comes from somewhere. I see it a lot, especially with South Asia, like especially India, and not my topic to speak on because I'm only researched far enough into like what I practice and what I try not to. But there's a lot that I'm like, that's not like a thing that you put in an aesthetic book and you sell it for like, you know, your like cool, fun, vibey summer. That's Hinduism, you know? So
It's kind of like the color runs where you just like everybody's just throwing the color cornstarch at each other, and I'm like, oh, so the Indian festival is that then?
yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, no, this is where you just get like packets of colored cornstarch, and you're really just really in love with your community, and you're showing how much you really appreciate each other, and it's really about bringing everybody together. And I'm like, you just call it what it is. Just, oh, you can trademark color run. I see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I brought cynical capitalism back.
Dude,
No,
you know what, though,
no, you're
TK?
allowed to. You're allowed to.
I mean, like, legit. Okay, so someone in chat brought up the like Dia de Muertos, right?
Mhm.
Let me tell you that the Dia de Muertos parade that you see in the media and that has become a thing was invented in like the 90s, the 80s. There
Yeah.
wasn't a parade. There was not a
Yeah.
parade. It wasn't that kind of a thing. It was a James Bond movie that was shot in Mexico City, and they were like, you know, be boss is if it was a whole big parade thing. It was invented for a fucking James Bond movie, and
Hell
then
yeah.
and then the US was like, "Aw, dip. That's what it is, right?" And people were like, "Sure, that sounds like some money." Okay. But like, oh my gosh, the actual holiday itself is such like an intimate family thing. It's like, you go to your family's graves if they're around, if you happen to be in the area, you light your
Yeah.
candles, you like throw your marigold around, you make them a plate of food, you have your ancestor altar, but it's not like a whole big parade kind of thing. Now it is, because everyone thought it was super cool and there was a lot of money to be made there. And
Yeah.
honestly, I'm only moderately mad about it. It's when I do see it in the rich white neighborhoods, and when I see it on people's like shoes, I see the sugar skulls everywhere.
Yeah.
I see the motif everywhere. I had a coworker who came into to work with the sickest kids with sugar skulls all over them, and I was like, "Oh, dip! I love like those calaveras." And she's like, "I don't know what that means." And I was like, "Fair enough, the sugar skulls." And she's like, "I have no idea what that means." I was like, now I'm mad.
Yeah.
Now I am so mad at you.
Yeah.
Like,
I think I feel that every time I see an Asian character tattoo, specifically
yeah.
Chinese, every
Okay, you know what?
time.
I'm gonna tell you that I do have one, but it does say T, and it's because it's my industry, and it's because
I mean, to be fair though, it's one character. You can't mess this up. I have people who have like written like these long diatribes, and I'm like, have you actually like read what you have on your body? They're like, yeah, it's this. I'm like, no, it really doesn't mean this at all. At
Oh my
all.
God.
Sort of like, oh, sweetie.
I had a guy who had like his chest. I saw a guy working at like a Moe's. He had a tattoo across his collarbone, and now I asked him it's like 4 characters long. So I asked him, "What do you think that means?" And he says, "Oh, it means I'm like a sexy beast." I'm like, "No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't." And he's like, "What? What does it mean?" It's like it is referring to a beast, but what you have on it is a derogatory wording for beast, which means you're technically this is used as a derogatory term. You put yourself in a very bad position.
That reminds me of
Yikes.
there's a screenshot from a movie that I like called Where the Millers or Meet the Millers, and there's one guy named Scotty P, I think, who has a tattoo on his clavicle over here that says "No Ragrets."
No regrets.
No
regrets. I feel like I'm very boring in that I was raised in a very, very heavily Christian household. And I got told all my life, be very critical of what you take in. And then I got very critical of the Bible, and I realized that like I don't know, if I'm
No,
a
not like that.
Yeah, right.
That's what he always
Wait,
tells you,
no.
like, not like that.
But no, like most of the
Yeah.
things that people like to use the Bible for doesn't actually come up in the Bible. Like I don't know.
Very
No.
careful.
I know, but
Like 9 hells. Like the fact that there are 9 levels to hell.
well, like they cite in Corinthians, it talks about how you shouldn't have immoral sex, and they use that as law for why you shouldn't have premarital sex. It doesn't actually refer to that. It says if you're married to someone, you should, be with that person. It does some weird stuff with trying to convince you of being celibate. But it says not to be immoral, which can mean all kinds of things. Not specifically don't do the boink if you're not wearing a ring.
But I want that quote so bad.
Don't do the
It's-
boink.
yes.
I'm gonna forever refer to it as the boink. Doing the
You
Because I
boink.
don't
boink
have
it,
another
you
F-bomb.
gotta put
Thank
a
you
ring
for
on
Okay.
it.
that.
Because I don't have another
That's true.
F-bomb
That's
too,
true.
okay?
Sorry.
You have,
I'm
you
sorry.
have used you used up several allotments, including the extras that TK stole.
The boink.
Yeah, no, like people try and weaponize the Bible, and it upsets me because like
Mhm.
you can read it and you can become a better person through it. But if I say that to people randomly, I'm going to sound like it in a very certain way,
Yeah.
you know. And like I can never say that. Oh yeah, I said the Bible and sound like a rational person because it's weaponized so much. And after studying all the stuff about animism, I'm still trying to figure this stuff out now because I have to reconcile. Oh yeah, I really like proper, ceremonies and habits and rituals. But now I'm pretty half convinced that like the tree knows me, and that's not like me making a joke. That's me like
No,
I pass by this tree every single time I walk my dog.
it absolutely
Mhm.
remembers you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like,
It
didn't even
does.
bat an eye at that. That
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
Like I'm trying to reconcile that in my head.
Yeah, New
Um,
World animists. High five, Friday.
Whoop, whoop.
So like it's this weird amalgamation of like I got raised with a bunch of Christianity, and I spent most of my life separating what was actually beneficial for me and what was definitely someone trying to tell me what to do with my body, and reconciling that with like understanding that there are more bonds you can have with people outside of like working or boinking.
Yep.
Boinking.
Winking.
Yeah, I got that from TV
Doing the boink.
because I can't use the word I want to use. Can I?
Wow. So much.
I don't
shade here.
know. Can you?
Listen, I'm a very illiterate person. I rely on cursing quite a lot in my day to day. Wait, TK, are you on a panel tomorrow?
I am. Take mine for tomorrow.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's more relationships than just working, friendship, and fucking.
Yeah.
There we go.
I was so afraid that you were gonna be like, okay,
Okay.
okay. You're like, right. All right. We should
Okay.
probably
We should.
wrap.
So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping up. So I want to thank first of all our panelists for having this very engaging conversation. We definitely could continue this for probably several hours if we had, or a year. It's probably a lot of repressed trauma from our experiences. Mostly. But yeah, we're gonna have to wrap up. So I want to thank the panelists for this amazing time that we've had here. I want to thank the viewers for ArCONa for helping out with the fundraising. We've raised quite a bit of money, so kudos to everybody. Don't forget, we have more ArCONa tomorrow. I'm back on one of those panels tomorrow, so you can come see me. TK is supposed to be on one of those panels, so also see TK. And Friday, are you in another panel tomorrow?
No, I'm not. I'm hosting book club all day tomorrow. Also,
Boy.
I just got my second vaccination today, so wish me luck with that. We'll see what happens.
Good luck tomorrow. It's always tomorrow.
First shot tomorrow. I'm so ready.
Yay!
Amazing.
And Lucia, are you on any other panels tomorrow?
Yes, I'm on the intersectionality one tomorrow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you can talk.
Keep it
you will hear
going.
Lucia talk more about intersectionality tomorrow. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for that. Everyone, if you could just go a quick shout out to yourselves about who you are, where they can find you, and then we'll wrap up.
Great. Well, I take it first because I have to go do witch things,
Yes,
actually.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm on my way to a tea leaf reading appointment. I'm Friday Elliott. Thank you for hanging out with us. I'm so happy to be here, and thanks for letting me be part of this conversation, even though technically, geographically, I was coming from a Western standpoint. I really appreciate you letting me play Rebel there. And yeah, what a wonderful time. You can find me elsewhere on the internet at Friday Elliott on Twitter, or Friday Afternoon Tea, which is my little queer nerd tea shop that I own here in Seattle, Washington. And you can find out about my witchy work on my link tree wherever I am on the internet. So that's me.
All right. I guess we'll go through backwards then. Paladin.
Hi, you can find me on Twitter under HD Paladin. Coming on Instagram, but why would you do that? I don't do anything there. I was co-director for the Islands of Sina Una, and by my count, I have at least 20 supplements for D&D being published in the next year, and I want to panic a lot. So stay tuned, I guess.
Stay tuned for the panic attack.
All 20 of them.
All 20 of them. All right. And Lucia?
Yeah, so you can find me everywhere as Seer Sword. Physical copies of Sinuna are coming. I know people have been asking me about it, and we're working on it, but I mean, COVID and everything kind of messed that up, so we're working through it. There's only so much we can do. And after that comes out, I'm hoping to do more witchy content on all my platforms, and I'm also always making and manufacturing dice, so you can check that out as well. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks. And TK?
I had to make sure my microphone was unmuted. I had to like look for the little red light because I moved my spider arm to the side, and now I can't tell when it's muted or not.
Aw.
It's me. It's TK. I write spooky stories on the internet. If you like spooky stories, you can read them at my website, tkjwrites.com, or you can follow me on Twitter, TK Joins the Fray. I'm out of ice cream in my house, so I guess I'll just rot.
I'm so sorry. I have like a bunch. There was buy one get one frees in Publix last week for Ben and Jerry's, so I bought like 10 of them.
I ate like 3 boxes of ice cream bars over this last week. I'm lactose intolerant.
Oh,
Anyway.
let me rephrase my condolences. I'm sorry on multiple fronts.
Some would say I deserve it. They'd be right.
Maybe.
That's it. That's all I got.
And that's what broke Paladin.
Just the last one. And I'm lactose intolerant. Like
that was good. That was
I'll
good.
be on a panel tomorrow. Come by and watch. I'm gonna steal everybody else's swears. That's a threat.
You heard it here, everybody. All right. And I have been your moderator. I am Jacky. You can find me on Twitter at Death by Mage. I primarily am the creative lead for Unbreakable Publishers. So we do Asian-owned stories, anthologies for TTRPG and D&D 5e, where we feature Asian creators telling their own stories. And we have 4 books coming out in 2021. Yay! With a team of... And Paladin will be doing some of the cover art, so you'll see more Paladin screaming.
What do you mean some?
Okay,
right, I know what I got paid.
I know. We're trying to keep some of we're trying to make it like the anticipation going.
Yeah, so tell them that I'm doing all of them. Let them guess what I'm going to do.
Fine. Like, Paladin's doing all of them. Admire Paladin's art. Just bask in it. We'll just bask in it. And I always love retweeting and sharing other people's wonderful projects across the space. So if you're following me, most of the time you'll see me retweeting everyone's wonderful projects and what's going on with the rest of the community. And with that, we're going to close out, and we'll let Lisa transition over whenever she can.
All right, my loves. Hello. I just kind of unceremoniously closed the Zoom chat for everybody. I meant to just leave myself, so sorry, y'all. Hello. Okay, so first, everybody stick around because we are 100% going to do a raid because I actually remembered to this time. But I want to do some thank yous, starting with a huge thank you to everybody who has been hanging out, who has been donating. This is day 1 of ArCONa, and we have already raised $1,755 for Bat Conservation International. That makes a huge difference, and I'm frankly very overwhelmed with the feels about it. That people care. People don't often care about bats, so it's please care. And people showed up and showed that they cared about bats, about this intersection of witchcraft and tabletop that I care so much about, and about my birthday too. So I appreciate you all. I also just want to say thank you to all of our panelists today. So my friend TK, who was on so many panels, Leona, Emily, Jessica, Rachel Brett for that awesome draw along, Liz Triprotic Cool, Paladin, Rachel, Jacky and Lucia and Friday, who are just on that last panel. I appreciate you all. And of course, thank yous for today would not be complete without a shout out to our Twitch moderators. Like you all like saved me from just going completely wild today. So Jess Dempsey, Kelly Shaver, Jonathan Boyle, April Raygun, thank you so much for moderating, handling this wild chat. I love seeing everybody so engaged. We couldn't have handled that without the moderators. So appreciate you all. And thank you again to Meredith, Heather, Friday, Sarah, and Kintz, who are our other volunteers making ArCONa happen. Tomorrow, I hope you will join us starting at 10 a.m. Pacific time for Magic Systems in TTRPG, followed by TTRPG inspired by Witchcraft and Tarot, Bleed from Craft to Game and vice versa, an interactive tarot design art stream with Bried, and intersectional witchcraft. I'm really psyched for all of tomorrow's content, especially after listening to everybody's conversations today. Tomorrow, I feel like is going to be even bigger and better. I feel it. So let's take a look at who is live right now to see who we can raid. I am seeing that the lovely Craftians, if you like yourself some Cthulhu mythos, but less problematic and with some awesome femmes on the cast, they're one of the podcasts in my podcast network, actually, Penwitch Studio, and they, I think, are playing some sort of like witchy graphic novel game called Wicked Willow. Anyway, we're going to toss to them, so please stick around, say hi to them. If you are a subscriber, throw in that bat raid emoji for them, and I will see the rest of you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody.